Hi everyone, this is Ashley and today I'm going to make a layout. So I start with photos as always, and then I pick paper to go with them. I think most of the products I use in this layout today were all by Jenni Bowlin. I love this mini pattern sheet of paper, so I cut it apart right away into the 12 little 4-inch square blocks of paper, so that way they'll be ready to use. They don't have to feel all anxious and worried about cutting into a fresh sheet of paper just to use a little piece. And this way I kind of have like a little mini pad of pieces of paper to use, which is kind of cool. So then I start tossing out pieces that I think might work well in the layout. There's some tickets, some old dictionary pages that I've got paint on, some little labels, and there are some other blocks cut from some accessories sheets by Jenni Bowlin. And then I rearranged it all so it's around my workspace and I can see it while I think about what I need to use. So I really love this piece of perforated paper. The little squares are labeled figures 1 through 96, and I think it works well with the theme of the layout. These are pictures of Ruby Sky crawling away, so it's kind of like illustrating her movement as she moves across the floor. So then I just start trying out little pieces of paper and things on the layout to see what's going to work and fill in the space well. Decide that maybe one of those little blocks of paper is going to work somewhere on the page, so I lay them all out, stack them up so I can see what I have, what the colors look like, what the patterns are like. Try on some dictionary paper, lift things up, move things around. Try the photo. That's okay, but need something at the bottom. And I really love the way those little stacks of paper look all lined up, so try them. Looks a little too busy. I try the tickets to sort of divide the top from the bottom, doesn't work. Try it without the other stuff, maybe it's going to be less busy, doesn't work. Try it with just the dictionary page. Still not quite right. Try to mat the photo, don't love it. Tickets again, still doesn't work. Basically, at this stage, I'm just tossing stuff out there, trying to get a feel for where this page is going and what's going to work and what doesn't. So then at this point, I remember that I have some more of that accessory sheet of paper by Jenni Bowlin, and I like the two strips at the bottom that are blue and white, so I cut them out, and I'm going to try to lay them underneath those 4 photos to sort of give a little bit of a visual break between the busyness of the blocks of pattern paper that I really like, but I think are too busy and conflict too much with the 4 different photos. Still doesn't work, but as I'm moving the little pieces of paper off the page, one of them catches my eye, and I really like the way it looks with the photos and the background paper I've chosen. It's kind of an interlocking grid pattern with blue. So the dictionary paper has some little holes in it from where I'd ripped it off a previous project, and I like that if I put some dark paper in there I can see through, so it gives a little bit of color and a little sort of peekaboo pattern interest up there in the corner. So right now I'm pretty happy with the way the layout looks. This to me feels like it's going to be the bones or the foundation of the page. And while I'm thinking about what to do next, scuff up the edges of the piece of paper, which I think is going to hold the title, although I'm not entirely sure at this point. And sort of fill around with things, line things up. Sometimes something at just a slight angle can make a big difference. Whether it's perfectly straight or over a fraction of an inch can really change the way the layout looks. So it's time for photo corners. I love these little sort of traditional sized ones. They're so great for drawing attention to part of a layout or framing it or just sort of defining it without having to use a mat. Didn't like the way it looked on the paper, so I'm just going to put them around the small strip of photos and sort of bracket the photos on either side with just 4 photo corners in total. So once again, I'm back with these little cards, trying to figure out how to make them work because I really thought that I wanted to use them on this page. I found some neon yellow photo corners. I like the contrast of the neon yellow against the grungy dictionary paper, so I tried that. Thought the 4 yellow photo corners altogether was too much, so tried something a little bit lighter. I think I found a metallic silver one and the sort of lacy gray one. That was better, but I like mismatching stuff, although too much mismatching just looks too busy. So I punch out some photo corners from one of those little Jenni Bowlin pieces of paper. And I think that looks much better. sort of frames the main part of the layout while not being too busy. Still thinking there needs to be something underneath that strip of photos at the bottom. It just looks empty. So while I'm thinking about those border strips, I just cut out a little piece, scuff it up with my scissors, kind of rub the scissors across the surface of the paper just to fade it a little and soften it. And I'm just going to tuck it underneath the main photo on the dictionary paper, just for a little interest, just kind of like a fun little touch. Like there's this little tab of ephemera or something. Okay, so at this point the layout still needs a lot of work. It needs a title, I have to figure out to put the journaling, there still needs to be something underneath that photo series at the bottom. Still not entirely sure what. So when I don't know what to do, I reach for tags. I like the craft tag because it complements the craft photo corners I've already chosen, and it seems to work really well there. Sometimes when I'm trying something on a page, I know right away whether it's going to work, whether it doesn't work, and this tag definitely worked. I remembered I had some blue labels that would work well with the colors I've chosen, so I grabbed those so I keep them in mind. And I think that some ink would work really well underneath that strip of photos. It's going to provide a little bit of texture, some color, some contrast, and put a little bit of something solid behind the photos so they don't look so much like they're floating. But that strip of paper didn't really work because I think it blocked off the top of the layout from the bottom too much. So I picked out some blue inks, laid some old dictionary pages down around my work surface to protect from any splatters, and move the photos out of the way, like right out of the way. And the good part about doing something like this is that if I get ink splatters everywhere on the dictionary pages, then I'll have some nice splattery paper to use on another project. So start with some small dark ones. I decided I want like more ink so it shows up really well behind the photos, so I just squeeze some on, first with some dark sort of inky blue color and then a brighter blue. You can see I was trying to sort of concentrate it in each color in its own area rather than mix it up too much so there'd be some defined areas of individual color. I was just checking to see if the ink is dry, and it wasn't, so I let it dry a little longer because I wanted the ink to be totally dry so it would look layered rather than bleeding together, which can also be a really cool effect. So this is a light gray from October Afternoon. And then I decided to add in some white for some nice stark contrast. This was a jar of gesso, and I used a paintbrush and some water and just thinned it out a little bit, squeezed it on from the paintbrush with my fingers. I just squeezed the bristles of the brush, and the paint just drops onto the page. Splatter a little, just add a little bit at a time until I think it looks like I've got some good coverage and there's some good color on there. So the next day, take off the paper, and I'm going to lay out the photos to see what I think, see if there's enough ink. And hopefully there's not going to be too much. And at this point, I'm pretty happy with this. I think that the ink has worked well. It's put something behind the photos. And I really like the way the dark blue ink underneath the third photo sort of hangs out lower than the rest and complements the way the tag sticks out the top of the block of pattern paper on the top left. It kind of gives a little directionality of movement to the page from the top left to the bottom right. So that wasn't really planned, but it worked out really well. And so now time for some little embellishments and sort of what I consider to be the finishing touches on the layout. I really like this fair ribbon punch. It's by Jenni Bowlin, and I like punching out of double-sided paper because it's so awesome. You just turn the tails over or the rosette over and you have a nice contrasting but coordinating pattern to make the ribbons out of. Get my little tin of confetti pieces and find a sort of moderate sized circle, and it just fits perfectly on top of the ribbon, which works out really well, adds a little more contrast. And I think I'm going to use some pop dots on these for extra dimension. So I just go crazy punching out shapes, ribbons. I stick to about 3 patterns with these so they can mix and match, but they don't look too busy. I don't want to introduce too much crazy pattern and all these little tiny pieces. So I just kind of move them around and see which colors work best. I don't want 2 that look too much the same in a row. I don't want all dark ones on one side or all light ones on the other. So try to balance it while mixing it up. And there's a little piece of gesso stuck to the bottom of my page, so I just kind of scraped it off. The nice thing about messy pages like this is that, if you want to sand a little spot or chip off some paint or add a little bit more or something happens, it's okay. Tuck some more tags in. Thought maybe it would work, but I think it was too much, so I just go back to the original one. And now it's time to choose what I'm going to do for the title. I pick out a whole bunch of letter stickers that I think are going to work color-wise, and then I just hold them up to the layout, and I just sort of go with a gut, yes, no. You know, the bright blue ones are too bright, the medium blue ones maybe weren't the right color. And I lay them to the side, then go back, find some more dark brown and black and white and ledgers. Sort of think about it. And I decided the brown ones work the best. They're going to give the most contrast, and I want this title to stand out a lot. So there we go, there's part of the title. Not all of it. I'm going to use those little letter stickers to write the other words in the title. I don't know whether the turquoise ones or the brown ones are going to look the best, so I just put one letter of each on there so I can take a look and think about it while I work on other parts of the layout. So that little ribbon needs a home. And layout needs something else, so I grabbed some little office tabs. They're patterned, and I think they're going to work well, but I just try laying them out and find the right color, the right shape, the right thickness. I found this plain chipboard one that is a great size. It works really well underneath that fair ribbon. So now I need to decide where these things are going to go, what I'm going to use. Decide not to use the patterned ones because it was just too much. And I cover the chipboard with some of that really awesome sort of red wheat patterned paper from Jenni Bowlin. I just used liquid glue, put a really thin layer on the chipboard, smushed the paper down with my fingers, and let it dry. While it was drying, I glued the little fair ribbons together. I like using liquid glue for some things like this because it sets up fairly quickly, but still stays wet enough that I have a little bit of working time, so if something needs to be nudged over or adjusted, I still have time to do that. I don't have to worry about peeling it apart and maybe ripping something. So I put the little fair ribbons on some pop dots, create a little dimension on the page. Put them back where they belong, and I just whack the chipboard piece out of the pattern paper with scissors, trim it as close as I can, and then grab a piece of sandpaper and sand up the edges to create a nice smooth edge to the pattern paper along the chipboard, and stress it a little. Finish up that ribbon. So I think I've decided what the title is going to be, and the rest of the title is going to go above the dead leg part. So I should explain maybe why it says dead leg. Ruby Sky has this really funny little crawl where she drags one leg, and it's always the same leg behind her. It just drags on the floor, and we just affectionately call it her dead leg. So this layout, I'm going to call it something like dead leg procession, or maybe procession on a dead leg. I'm not entirely sure. So while I'm deciding that, I decided to glue the photos down. I'm going to think about the title. Titles are important. Sometimes it takes me a while to decide. And glue all these little layered bits together, stick them down. I scuffed up the edges on this photo, but not the rest, because I was thinking it was kind of apart from the rest. So if it looked different than the rest, that was probably pretty good. I ripped off the bottom portion of the tag. I always keep things like that to the side. Keep a little stack of them on my desk. They're great for if you need a little bit of texture or layering behind something. I just grab a stack of them, and they're there ready to use. So this layout is nearing completion, and I decided to put it on another piece of paper. I really love this Birdland paper, again from Jenni Bowlin. So I scuff up the edges really well, get in there with my fingernails and put in a few really small tears and kind of dog-ear it a bit. Give it a lot of really great texture around the edges, so it goes with the grunginess of the rest of the layout. And I'm going to have to stick it down pretty well because the paper unfortunately warped a little when I put all the ink on it. So with the backing paper being craft, there wasn't enough contrast between those pretty gray photo corners, so I decided to use some of that really awesome blueprint mini paper and make some new photo corners and just stick them down. I taped these ones down on the back just to make sure they'd stay up, but stay down, stay stuck. Make sure everything is all squared up, lined up just the way I want it. And then I just sketch in a little pencil line just under the edge of the top piece so I can apply adhesive and know that I'm going to get it right out to the edges so it sticks down nice and flat. Line it up and carefully put it down, adjust the edges a little bit. There's a little tiny crinkle there on the bottom. That was too bad, but I'm going to fix that and deal with it in just a minute. It's one of those mistakes that turns out to be a happy mistake, as I call them. I put the neon yellow photo corners on pop dots to give them a little extra dimension, have them stand up around that focal photo. Then it's time for the title. I just put it on with a pair of tweezers. I find it much easier to line up those little tiny stickers with a pair of tweezers in hand. I call this one Procession on a Dead Leg. And then to cover up that little crinkle, I used one of those oval pale blue office stickers, which is awesome. I wasn't planning on putting anything down there in that part of the layout, but in the end I'm much happier with this. So sometimes those little accidents and mistakes turn out to be a good thing because they make you come up with solutions that you wouldn't have normally otherwise thought of. So I sand the edges of these chipboard pieces just a little bit before sticking them down. And then stick down the title block. We're almost done. I feel like I've been saying that for a while now, but make sure everything's stuck down. Stand up the tag a little bit. Adjust the letters. They weren't quite straight. And now I typed the journaling on a typewriter. It's just 2 lines, and I wasn't really sure where I wanted it to go. So I used some scrap paper to sort of estimate the size of the journaling strips. And I spread them around the layout, because I initially thought when I had put the photos down that I would spread the journaling out like this, but then when I saw it printed in just 2 lines and a block, I really liked the way it looked. But I went with my first thought, because sometimes your first thought is your best thought and you should just go with what you wanted to do. Think about it for a few minutes before I commit to adhering it, and then stick it down. Sometimes I just have to tell myself, you just need to stick it down and get on with your life, because if I didn't, I would probably only do like 2 layouts a year. And then I got out a date stamp, stamp the date. A scrap of paper just to check to make sure I had the date right and it was going to go on, not upside down or anything. And I was planning on putting the date on that little oval sticker, but I liked the way it looked on the scrap paper so much. I cut it out and crumpled it up a bit and just stapled it to the top of the page. So again, one of those sort of accidental discoveries that I was happier with in the end. I just scrunched up the edges of the journaling strips a little tiny bit so they weren't too perfect. And there it is, the finished layout. So, thanks so much for tuning in today and joining me, and I hope that you will come again for the next layout. Thanks, bye.